Many times here in the previous speeches, we have said that we like to train leaders here, but we also have the ambition to train responsible, inspired and inspiring leaders. And for this reason, as Christine has mentioned this morning, for those of you that were here, at HEC we have built here a center that is called SNO. So I think by now you have heard this name several times. For sustainability and organizations in 2008. And actually, we don't want this sort of responsibility to be only something to nicely decorate brochures, but we want it to be real. And the purpose of the center is really to do that. First of all, because it infuses in the different courses that you can have here in your curriculum as a whole. So those of you that were here in L3, I'm sure you recognized it in your engagement and commitment part of the curriculum, so parcours engagement. But also, of course, it diffuses in the research that is done at HEC, specifically with my colleague, Professor Rodolphe Durand, that is working more specifically on purposeful leadership. In the SNO Center, there are a couple of other pillars. One that is dedicated to climate change, that is dedicated to more inclusive economy, and of course, the one on purposeful leadership that we are going to talk about today. So basically, you can see that it is a topic that is present in your courses, in your curriculum, and in research as well at HEC. So this topic is like a red thread in your studies. And we thought that it's really nice, also for those of you that were not here last year, to start this academic year with a keynote address on this topic. Today, it is a great honor to welcome Hubert Joly. So I don't know if all of you know him, but Hubert Joly is an HEC alumnus. He's a distinguished leader and committed advocate for purpose-driven leadership. He will open our address today. He's also former chairman and CEO. Hello, Hubert. Thank you for joining. He's also former chairman and CEO of Best Buy, senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, member of the board of directors of Johnson & Johnson and also Ralph Lauren Corporation. He has been recognized in the top 100 CEOs in the world by Harvard Business Review, also in the different rankings from Barron's, Glassdoor, Thinker 50. So we are very happy and lucky to have him today. You can see on the chairs here, and thank you very much, Hubert, for that. You can see his book, The Heart of Business, Leadership Principles for the Next Era of Capitalism. I really strongly encourage you to use this book to inspire you in your future leadership. Many of you in less than 10 years, you're going to have a team. And so your ability to be a good leader is absolutely key for us and for your future image and for your future career. Make sure that you get inspired. Today's opening is going to be about leading with purpose. It's a call to bold, human-centered leadership. So it's about the transformative impact of leading with purpose and aligning personal and organizational missions. The speech is an invitation to lead freely and critically, to ground ambition in service, and to grow into leaders who shape a more human and purposeful world. Together, we begin or continue this journey that matters. Thank you very much, Hubert Joly, for joining us today. It's really an honor to have you. Please join me in warmly welcoming him for this inaugural address today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. It's the morning for me in New York City, but good afternoon to you. It's a great joy for me to have this opportunity to be with you as you begin this new academic year. And I first want to start by congratulating you for all of your accomplishments and reaching this point in your own journey. And this point, of course, is an invitation to look ahead at your life, trying to shape, the kind of life you want to live. You'll have many choices to make in the months and years ahead, the career choices, the life choices. It's a bit like a beautiful canvas on which you have the opportunity to paint. I understand this can be a bit daunting, right? Because these are big questions, and no one is expecting to have answers to all of these questions early in the journey. But I feel that these are important questions to stay focused on, right? What kind of purpose do I want to pursue in life? What kind of leader do I want to be? And so what I'd like to do this afternoon is three things. One is share a little bit about my own personal journey, looking at some of the key moments that have shaped me as a leader and how I've used some of these learnings in the world of business, not as a model, but more to share what I've learned. And then the second thing I'd like to do is an invitation, almost a provocation for you guys as you begin this new year on campus. And then I'd love to have a dialogue with you. We'll have time for questions. So as we spend the next few minutes, think about what questions may be on your mind. So, and again, thank you for this opportunity. So first, my journey, I want to talk about 3 or 4 searing moments that have shaped me as a leader. These crucible moments that have impacted who I am today. And one of them was about 30 years ago when I had the opportunity I was asked by a couple of friends who are monks to write with them an article about the philosophy and theology of work. Why do we work? Work is going to occupy a big part of your life. Why do we work? Is work a punishment because some dude sinned in paradise, for those of us in the monotheist faith? Or is work something you do so that you can do something else that's more fun, like compete in the jump HEC or anything like that? Or is work part of our fulfillment as human beings, our opportunity to contribute to the common goods and serve others in support of something we care about? That's an important question for you, for each and every one of us to think about. And I know that I landed more on the latter than the former answers. About at the same time, I was a partner with McKinsey and Company in the Paris office. And I remember a dinner with a client. At McKinsey had this great deal with my clients. They would pay us vast amounts of money, and I would learn from them. So this was a great deal I had with them. And during that dinner in the office, it was Rue de Bassano at the time, we had dinner with Jean-Marie Descartes. He just had come back from a seminar with other CEOs, and he shared with me, Hubert, this was 30 years ago. He said the purpose of a company is not to make money. He said it's an imperative. Of course, you have to make money. It's a result, but it's not the purpose. And he said in business, of course, and you guys know this, right? There's 3 imperatives. You have the people imperative. You need to have the right team, properly equipped and motivated. You have a business imperative. You need to have customers who are happy with your products. And then you have the financial imperative. He said it's really important to refuse trade-offs between these 3 imperatives and to take them in that order: people first, then business, then finance. And he said there's a very practical implication of that. He said when you run your monthly performance management meetings, right, you'll have those. Don't start with the financial results, because you're going to spend your meeting analyzing them and dissecting them. That's not interesting. Start with people and organization, then go to business, and finish with finance. Your CFO will make sure that you spend enough time on the results, but if you do it this way, you'll really focus on the key drivers. And then he said, as it relates to the purpose of the company, probably it was a bit vague at the time. It has something to do with, the fulfillment of human beings and serving others. It was a bit vague, but this big distinction between an imperative and a result and a purpose was something that stuck with me. Another moment that shaped me was about 25 years ago. So at the time, I'd been a partner at McKinsey at a young age. I was on the executive team at the time of Vivendi Universal, a big media and entertainment company. And so to quote David Brooks, I was at the top of my first mountain. By many measures, I had been successful. Except at the top of that first mountain, there was no joy. It was dry. There was no happiness. I felt stuck. I felt that I was not getting joy from what I was doing. So call this my midlife crisis. It's not going to happen to any one of you, I'm sure, but it happened to me. And so this was a great moment it felt painful in the moment, but with hindsight, it was a great moment to step back and look at how I had been living my life. And I realized I'd been too driven by power, fame, glory, and money. And these, for some people, these can be great drivers. But for me, it had taken me to a stage, but it was not really what was giving me happiness. And so this forced me over a number of years to reflect on my life and what I wanted to do with it. And so, I had some help. I did the spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, to revisit my life and try to discern what was giving me joy and what would be my calling in life. And over the years, I continued to think about this, what is my purpose in life? And today I've phrased it, and my purpose is to unleash human magic in myself, in people around me, in my granddaughters, but also in the leaders I worked with when I was a CEO, or that I work with when I'm coaching or teaching and so forth. That's really what drives me. There was another moment before I joined Best Buy in 2012 that had a big influence. So it was in 2009. At the time, I was the CEO of Carlson Companies, which is a travel and hospitality company based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And one day, I will always remember this, my head of HR, Elizabeth Bastoni, walks into my office and says, "Hubert, would you like to work with a coach?" And I said, "Elizabeth, has anybody complained? Have I done something wrong?" Because, of course, at the time, at the view of coaching as being remedial. You give Jack or Mary a coach because, they have behavioral problems. And what she said, no, I have this coach, Marshall Goldsmith. Some of you may have read his books. He specializes in helping successful leaders get better. And if you think about it in the world of sports, all of the great athletes, Roger Federer, Carlos Alcaraz, they all have coaches, right? But somehow in the business world, we had imagined that having a coach was remedial and that we didn't need any help. And so Marshall really helped me tremendously at that time, because I was suffering from a disease that I probably caught when I was preparing for the entrance exam at HEC, which was the quest for perfection. I thought I needed to be perfect. And I realized that the quest for perfection is really not productive, because if I'm looking to be perfect, of course, I'm not going to be perfect. If I'm expecting my team members to be perfect, I'm always going to be disappointed. And so whenever I got feedback, I would struggle with what to do with it. And what Marshall introduced me to is feed forward. Based on the feedback from my coworkers, my board, my executive team, what are some areas where I decide I'd like to get better at? All right. And there's always something we can get better at. If one day on one of your teams, there's somebody who said, "No, I'm good. I don't need to get better at anything," you can always suggest to them, how about working on humility as something you can get better at? All right. That can be an opportunity. And so that opened me up to looking for feedback and ways to get better. So these were 4 moments that helped me prepare for the job I got in 2012, which was to be the CEO of Best Buy. So for those of you who've not been to the US, Best Buy is the world's largest consumer electronics retailer, selling electronics and appliances. You have one in each one of the countries you may be coming from. It's about $50 billion in revenue, 100,000 employees. And in 2012, whereas Best Buy had been a very successful company, they were the best at what they did. Over the previous 3 years, they really had fallen to the point, there was the threat from Amazon at the time. And so it was the sense of everyone that the company was going to die. In fact, there was zero buy recommendation on the stock. The market cap of the company was about 2 or 2.5 times EBITDA, which is not a good thing. And somehow I got convinced to take the job to lead the turnaround and resurgence of Best Buy. And I'm not going to go into all of the details of the 7 years that I was there, but I want to share some insights from that time. And the punchline is that when I studied, the share price quickly was at around $11. When I left, it was about $100, so about 10x or 9x during that time. So arguably a successful turnaround. Now, when I joined, the input from the analysts and the investors was cut. The usual recipe for turnarounds. So you're going to have to close a lot of stores, fire a lot of people. And so we looked, and at the time, pretty much all of the stores were profitable. So closing stores was not going to be a super impactful idea. And firing a lot of people almost implied that people were the problem. My intuition was that people were going to be the solution. And so I could describe to you, what we did, which would have been the strategy or the operational improvement plan, which was about matching Amazon prices, investing in the online shopping experience, in the speed of shipping, in the store experience in the stores, taking some costs out, partnering with the world's foremost tech companies. That's the what. But what's interesting is more the how. And that's where I've learned the most during that time. And the how was all about, placing people at the center. Now, every company that you've worked at or that you'll work at probably is going to say, people is the most important thing. The question is, what does that mean? So in our case, it meant starting with people and in particular, listening to the frontliners. The big advantage I had when I became CEO of that company is that I knew nothing about retail. I worked in a variety of industries, but never in retail. And so I had no choice. I had to ask. And so I spent my first week on the job in working in a store in St. Cloud, Minnesota. And I think I have it here, actually. This was my badge. Can you see my badge? CEO in training, right? And I spent my first week on the job asking the frontliners, what's working, what's not working, what do you need? And they had all of the answers. They told me stories that I would have never heard about at headquarters, like the search bar on the bestbuy.com site is not working, right? They gave me examples. And so my job was super easy. Show up, ask the questions, take notes, and do as I was told. The other part about starting with people, of course, was reshaping the management team, the top management team. I think in a turnaround, you never fire somebody too quickly at the top because the team that led the car into the ditch is probably probably partly responsible. So making sure we had the right team at the top. The other thing was finishing with people. So instead of cut, and firing people, you see these announcements of companies we're eliminating 10,000 jobs, 20,000 jobs, right? We said, no, headcount reduction is going to be a last resort. Our priority number one is going to be grow the revenue. We're going to take cost out, but most of it is going to come from non-salary expenses. Non-salary expenses, which are all of the elements of the cost structure that have nothing to do with people. And that's at most companies, that's the vast majority of the cost structure. And you only reduce headcount as a last resort. It changes everything. And then starting with people, so if you think about a company as a human organization made of individuals working together, creating energy is a big part of what you have to do as a leader. Now in physics, we learned that you cannot create energy, which is unfortunate. But in a human organization, of course, you can create energy. How do you create energy? By co-creating listening, co-creating the diagnosis, co-creating the plan, getting going, celebrating the early wins, being vulnerable. If something is not working, you actually talk about it, and so on and so forth. And so that was phase one. And then phase two, when we had stabilized the business and started to improve performance after 3 or 4 years, we had a second phase, which was much more about purpose. That's why we introduced purpose, right? When we started to think about how can we accelerate the growth of the company, of course you can do strategy work, segmentation, targeting, positioning. You're going to learn this if you've not already done that in your marketing courses. But we found that thinking about our purpose as a company was going to be particularly impactful. And it started not with a discussion about the company purpose, but about our purpose as individuals. And I remember, that's the story I want to share with you. So probably it was 2015. Every quarter we would get together as a management team. And during one of these offsites, at the end of the first phase, we had asked every one of the executive team members to come to the offsite with a picture of themselves when they were little. So we got some really cute pictures, as you can imagine. And during over dinner, we were asked to share with each other the story of our life and our purpose in life. And what we discovered was two things. One, everybody on the executive team was a human being, not just a CFO or CMO, but a complicated, quirky, messy, beautiful human being. And two, all of us, with a couple of exceptions, shared the same kind of purpose in life. At the highest level, doing something good to somebody else, which I believe is in the heart of every human being. Even Darth Vader, his son believes the Force is still in him, right? So that tells you even Darth Vader. And so then we stepped back and we said, look, we're the leadership team of Best Buy. Why don't we use this platform to build an organization where we would love to work at, where employees would love to work at, where customers would love to do business with, where communities would appreciate having us around, and where shareholders, of course, would make money. And so the job became not just a job, but a calling of something, creating something truly unique. Now, many companies, draft a purpose, and that's what we did. We said it's to enrich lives through technology by addressing key human needs. We're not just a consumer electronics retailer. But then the work is about, working on the strategy and reflecting the purpose in the strategy, shaping the culture so that you can, in my words, unleash human magic all the way to the front line and create an environment in which, many leaders and individuals, 100,000 people, can thrive and accomplish extraordinary things, including taking the share price to $200. And so in that journey, what did I learn? I learned, number one, that I feel that today there is an urgent and important need for a refoundation of business around the pursuit of a higher purpose, placing people at the center, embracing all stakeholders in a declaration of interdependence, and treating profit as an outcome, not the goal. And that's how you create extraordinary levels of performance. I've learned that business can be a force for good. In fact, must be a force for good. In a time where governments are less and less effective, there is a need, there's an opportunity for the business world to make a positive contribution. And that makes the role of business leaders much more important. I've learned around the importance of our personal purpose. It's in my teaching at the business school, it's super hard to be a great leader if you're not clear about who you are and what is your purpose in life. And so, in a sense, purposeful leadership starts with reflection on what is my purpose, and then, of course, shaping a higher purpose for the entire organization. I've learned about the role of leaders. So I grew up last century. Now, last century, the model of the great leader, Jack Welch, was the smartest person in the room. Tell other people what to do, takes no prisoner, and so forth. My sense today, and that's shared with many, many leaders, is that our role as leaders, for the most part, is to create an environment where others can be successful. Metaphor of the gardener. So I'm not a gardener, but I've watched, right? In gardening, there's landscaping. So of course you need to set the frame. A lot of the work is making sure the soil is fertile so that the seeds, can grow and produce beautiful flowers. So our role as leaders is to create an environment in which others can be successful. For me, that was a big shift in mindset for my thinking about my role as leaders. And then the last thing I've learned that I want to share is that is the importance of what I could call intrinsic motivators. The old school would be, in order to mobilize people, you tell them the direction, you put incentives in place, and you hope good things happen. What I've learned is that if you use carrots and sticks, you get donkeys, right? And I don't know that you want to lead an organization that's full of donkeys. At the same time, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, so that's not good either. I think the biggest drivers of extraordinary human behaviors are what I call, the ingredients of human magic, right? So they are building genuine, authentic human connections, being able to connect our personal purpose with the purpose of the organization, creating psychological safety, empowering teams, creating an environment where people have autonomy. I could do a survey with your group, right? Raise your hand if you like to be told what to do. Raise your hand if you like to be told what to do. I don't see any hands, right? So that's going to be the same in the organizations you lead, creating a learning environment and creating a growth mindset. That's how you unleash human magic at scale in support of a higher purpose. That's what I've learned. So what is my invitation to you as you begin this year on campus? My invitation to you is that, without stressing out, is spend time on this critical question of your purpose in life and how you want to lead when you become a leader. This question of what is ultimately my purpose in life? That's a daunting question. That's a difficult question. I don't expect, I didn't have answers to this question when I was your age. But staying with this question is something I invite you to do. I think you can look for the answer to this question at the intersection of, what you're passionate about, what you're uniquely gifted at, and the needs in the world that you feel you have an interest in addressing. It's also this question about how you want to be remembered, as a human being and as a leader. And so my invitation to you is, before the end of your time on campus, give it a shot. Try to write down what might be your purpose in life. Mine is to unleash human magic. You're going to have your unique purpose. Write it down, not set in stone, but write it down. Consider writing to yourself a letter, that you would write in the future, 20 to 30 years out, 10, 20, 30 years out. Write a letter to your younger self, and then keep it with you and revisit it, from time to time as you progress in life. And in a sense, this invitation, back to what Anne was saying, is a call for action. And that's what I would say in conclusion. We can probably all agree that the world we live in today is full of challenges, right? And it can be at times depressing to see everything wrong going on in the world. But my view of that, to quote Charles Dickens, it was the worst of times, but it's also the best of times. Does the world need great leaders today more than ever? Absolutely yes. And when I look at your generation, I am super optimistic about the difference you can make in the world, and I'm excited and curious to see what you're going to do in the world as you spend your time here on campus, and then when you leave campus in a few years. So I wish every one of you the best during your time here, and again I'll be curious to watch what you guys end up doing, and I thank you for your attention. I look forward to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hubert, for your words and your strong call to act. But before that, call to be, maybe. Any question to start the dialogue? Sure.
Yeah. If good afternoon. I stand up.
Maybe you tell me your name and where you're from.
I'm Italian. My name is Ettore. My question would be, if you do have any, is there any mistake that you would specifically recommend not to make in our journeys or whatever, based on your experience?
How much time do you have?
Thank you.
Mistakes. You know, a big mistake I made, I mentioned it, which was this thought that I needed to be perfect. And there's work to be done on that. So my wife, Hortense, who is an executive leadership coach, you can see our book in the background, The Unlocked Leader, has the view that, many of us, at some point in our lives, we feel stuck. There's some things that we've done that have worked well, but that maybe they're not as good for a while or after a while. And sometimes it's because we've been listening to a voice that is not necessarily our voice. And the voice I was hearing in my head was that I needed to be perfect. Now, I've joked with my mother, because of course it's coming from the mother always, that, I'm very grateful to her. She challenged me. She felt that I could do things in life, and so she always challenged me. But there was a point where that challenge became counterproductive. And when my book came out in 2021, it happens that it was ranked number 3 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, and I shared that with my parents because I was, as I said, this is what's happening. And you know what my mother told me? It's good to start low because you can always improve. Of course, she was right. But at the time, I was able to share with her, Mom, I'm content. My goal in life is not to be ranked. My goal is to be the best version of myself I can be. And I know I can always do better, and I'll always seek to do better. But what had hindered me for many, many years is the sense that I was never enough and that I had flaws. And so one of the things I had to learn was to know who I am, so self-awareness, to accept who I am, right? I have to accept myself. That doesn't mean I accept all of the things I'm not doing well. I can always get better. But self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-compassion are things that are so essential. I can ask you a question. Think about, in your life, people you love unconditionally. Right? Think about who you love unconditionally. Okay? So perhaps it's your partner, your parents, at my age, my children, grandchildren, my best friend. Okay. Raise your hand if one of the people you love unconditionally was you. Raise your hand. Okay, there's one. Okay, I don't see many hands, but maybe a few. Congratulations. I think learning to love yourself, not because you're perfect, but including your imperfections. I think congratulations, all of us is a quirky, messy, imperfect human being. And learning to see in ourselves and in others what they're uniquely good at, but also their vulnerabilities. That's how you truly build human connection. So for me, this may have been the biggest work, is to accept I was not perfect and I was not expected to be perfect, and that my team members, my job was to try to identify their unique genius, not get frustrated by their shortcomings or their quirkiness.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for this insightful presentation. I am Alexandre from Lebanon. My question is the following. How did you know that investing in the human connection was at some point inefficient? So you mentioned a very interesting point that you had to make a great environment, a work environment that suits all the employees. How did you reach a point where you said we have to stop investing in people and start investing in something else maybe, or not invest at all? Thank you.
So I think you never stop investing in people because it's a journey. I think the journey of life is that you're never done. But I would not say you exclusively invest in people. So one of the privileges I have today as a professor at the business school is to work on cases and do research on companies. The case we're finishing is on Walmart. And the last 10 years has been an extraordinary revitalization of the company under the leadership of Doug McMillon. And Doug would say that Walmart today, is a human-centered, tech-powered company. And I would have said the same thing at Best Buy, or we're doing a case on Delta Airlines, which is today the best airline in the U.S. And they've had this passion for investing in people, but they're also investing in their planes. They're also investing in their hubs. And at Best Buy, we invested in technology and so forth. So it's not an or, it's an and. But the way we reframe your question, the time you stop, caring about people, that's going to be the end, because these things are. It's almost an Asian thing to think that you're on a journey. The journey never ends, and so that would be my answer to you.
Good morning, Mr. Joly. This is Francesco, an Italian student. First of all, thank you for your very insightful words. My question would be, you spoke about climbing that first mountain and finally reaching the peak, but then realizing the need of a mindset shift. However, do you agree or think that it is possible to reach the peak without what NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang says being necessary suffering?
So that's a. I love your question, and do we first need to succeed and then be good, right? So what's the sequencing? David Brooks also has done a lecture on. He focuses on Genesis 1 and 2, where there's two visions of man. The vision of man that's about conquering the world, and a vision of man that's about loving. And you first need to be like Carnegie, a hard-ass business leader, build a fortune, and then in the second part of your life, you become a philanthropist. I'm doing a case actually on Jensen Huang and NVIDIA. It's such an incredibly fascinating story. How do you go? I knew NVIDIA when I was in the video games industry in the 90s. Nobody would have bet that 30 years later there would be $4.4 trillion in market cap. So to your question, I would not oppose a world of hard work and pain and suffering in a world of caring. Sometimes people say, human-centric, that's kind, that's nice, but that's not how you get performance and results. And every problem in the planet can be solved by a 2x2 matrix, right? So imagine a 2x2 matrix. One dimension is you have a high-performing organization on one axis, high or low, and then you have a human-centered organization, low and high. Nobody wants to be in a low humanity, low performance organization, right? Let's be clear. I don't think many people want to be in an organization that's high performance and low humanity. I don't think that's really sustainable. I'll come back to NVIDIA in a second. Being in a very human-centered organization but low performance, that's not sustainable. Of course, the dream is to be in a human-centered organization with high performance. But that can be very intense, right? Because clearly, Jensen Huang, he's extreme, right? I read a book this summer about the NVIDIA way, and they're, in my view, too extreme. Over the weekend, if you don't answer an email within 2 hours, people are asking, "What are you doing?" Right? So from that standpoint, that's a little bit too extreme. But the success of NVIDIA is all based on this group of people, starting at the beginning and then developing the culture, that are passionate about what they do and are eager to do extraordinary things. Again, when you compare and contrast NVIDIA versus Intel, Intel had more reasons to be successful in this new age of computing than NVIDIA. NVIDIA was a computer graphics card that was almost bankrupt after launching their first chip in 1993. So it's through this leadership and culture. The other powerful example, which may be a bit easier to describe, is Microsoft under Satya Nadella. You know, in 2014, when Satya becomes CEO, and I got to know him really well because Best Buy and Microsoft were very close partners, especially distributing, you know, personal computers. You know, Satya follows 15 years of Steve Ballmer that are not very human. And in my view, and the view of many, the key ingredients to the resurgence of Microsoft under Satya was the establishment of a very human culture based on vulnerability and empathy and cultivating a growth mindset. Their strategy is to address unmet, unarticulated customer needs. Unmet, unarticulated customer needs. The only way you can address unmet, unarticulated customer needs is if you have empathy with your customers and have a very human connection. So there's an example in a case I teach where somebody from Microsoft who spends a week full-time working with the police in Austria to understand their needs with technology. So I think that even in the tech companies, you know, the tech is coming from human beings. And I think that if you can, you know, I'm sure you can create extraordinary performance for a while, but then, you know, how sustainable this is. Now, you could use another example, which would be Elon Musk with his companies. Now, most people would say Elon is not really human, right? So, I mean, he's pretty special. And my argument is actually not even to say that the philosophy I've developed over the years, the principles I've developed over the years, and that are shared by many, I'm not even going to say that they are the best ways to run a company. My invitation to you, though, is for you over time to develop your own leadership philosophy, your own leadership principles that, you know, are going to help you drive extraordinary levels of performance. And it's interesting to be inspired by others, but you might as well be yourself, right? Because everybody else is taken. And so I encourage you to develop your own point of view and see what resonates with you, what works. I've shared with you my philosophy, but it's not to say that this is the only one. It's not to say that's even the best one, but that's the one I've embraced. Does that make sense?
Good afternoon. Well, good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for your words and for your time. You talked about life purpose. You suggested us to write it down now that we are starting our journey here. Sometimes I have the feeling that life purpose is a really big thing, and it feels overwhelming to think, okay, I have to understand what my life purpose is. And I've heard sometimes as well that we might have different purposes according to the stage of life that we are in. Do you think that it might be right to talk about life stage purposes instead of a life purpose? Did you always have the same purpose, or it came later on your life? What's your take on this?
I think that's such a good point. And you're right, it can be daunting. And as I was preparing for today, I almost hesitated about challenging you to do this because, and I know that from the experience of my kids and, you know, my students, and also remembering my own life, this can be daunting. And so I think that just relax. If you write it down at some point, there's nothing that prevents you from evolving it and regularly revisiting it once you've written it down and editing it and challenging it, asking yourself, you know, regularly, am I living, you know, am I doing a good job of living my purpose? Is my purpose still relevant today? And, you know, it doesn't need to be set in stone. So don't carve your purpose in a piece of marble, but write it down with an eraser. And before, you know, as you keep that question in mind, be sensitive as you meditate. You know, if some of you meditate or do some self-reflection exercises. Be attentive. What gives you joy? What drains you? You know, at the end of your day, you can reflect on your day, at the end of the week or the month. What has given me joy? What has drained me? And try to write it down. And try to distill to, because then it's going to help you crystallize what is really moving you, right? Emotionally, and pay attention. So another mistake I've made so many mistakes, was thinking that, you know, everything came from the head, right? And, you know, in last century, people would emphasize IQ as a very important quality. And, you know, as a leader, you were supposed to be the smartest person in the room, right? And making sure that everybody knows how smart you are. One of the things I've discovered is that as we live our lives and as we lead, super important to use all of our body parts. Our head, but also our heart, our soul, our guts, our ears, our eyes. So be attentive to the motions of your soul. And this doesn't need to be religious, right? Every human being has a soul, right? So be attentive to what moves you, because that may be things that you become passionate about. And make notes along the way. Journaling is a good exercise. Probably many of you are already doing that. And then, you know, from time to time, reflecting, what does that tell me about what might be my purpose? But again, yes, you can completely relax. It can be true. This can be your purpose today. And then you get to edit it as often as you want.
Hi, thank you for your time. I'm Ines and I'm Moroccan. So we are taught at HEC to lead with purpose, and I wanted to know what your advice would be for juniors who want to work with purpose while becoming leaders. As we're embracing our younger years and having junior roles, is there any way to work towards an inclusive and sustainable world this way? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So everybody's a leader, right? As a minimum, we're leaders of our life. And so I think that, again, it's leadership from the inside out. So starting with clarity around your own purpose and leadership, being curious. So that's one of the things I've seen in the business world sometimes, you know, and especially in France. So I grew up in France. We've been taught to separate our public life from our private life, right? There's a concept in France called laïcité that says you never talk about spirituality in the public setting, all right, or your religion. And so we separate the public and the private. I think that's a big mistake. And so as you are a member of a team, being curious about the other members of your team, and again, you don't need to be the leader of the team. You're a member of the team, and therefore you are a leader of the team. Being curious about, you know, who these other team members are. You know, what is their life story? What drives them? What motivates them? And then, you know, we know that high performance teams are moved by a common goal, right? And so there will be business objectives, of course, but as a team, you know, do you have a team purpose? What do you want to accomplish? And, you know, we talk about, you know, being a force for good in the world. One of the things I've learned over the years is to be clear about what I control, what I can control, what I can influence, and what I cannot control. And the older I get, in a sense, the smaller I become. And I try to influence what I do and how I behave, and have an influence on people around me. There's many things. I cannot stop the war in Ukraine, right? I just can't. So I'm not going to worry about it. But what can I do where I am now, right? And in the place where I am. I could ask you a question. There's only 2 days in the world, 2 days in the year where there's nothing you can do. Only 2 days in the year when there's nothing you can do. Anybody knows the answer to this question? Only 2 days in the year. Somebody knows the answer. We need to give them the mic.
Maybe tomorrow and yesterday.
Yes, congratulations. And so today is always, it's always today, and it's the present, right? And it's a present. And that's, what can I do today to live my purpose and be the kind of person I want to be? And so that's a conversation you can have in your team, early in your career. The influence you can have in the world is limited, except it's boundaryless in terms of the influence you can have around people around you. So that's how I would think about this.
So, hello, sir. My name's Liz. I'm French, Caribbean. And so I had a question about vulnerability. How do you consider the dialectic part of that sentiment that can both provoke fears in a team where the heart of the business has to stay strong and also be necessary, because when you just doesn't show the problem, it can get bigger and bigger. So what are your thoughts about managing vulnerability in a team?
Thank you for your question. So we know from research and from practice that teams where there's no psychological safety, my great colleague Amy Edmondson has written beautifully about this. She's written a book called The Fearless Organization. There's research by Google that shows that the biggest driver of differences in performance amongst their teams was psychological safety. So the sentiment in the team that you can speak up and speak freely, and that's another thing I had to learn. Right, when I was growing up, I remember my parents had some friends visiting, and the friends of my parents asked me a question, and I'm probably a teenager at the time. And I say, I don't know the answer to this question. And the gentleman then tells me, son, in the business world, make sure you never say, I don't know, right? Because then otherwise you're going to lose your credibility. That was the most stupid, piece of advice I ever gotten. Because if I don't know, I don't know. And pretending I know when I don't know is stupid. I can say, I don't know today, and I'm going to find out. And so being able to say, my name is Hubert and I need help. My name is Hubert and I don't know, was super hard for me to get to. Because remember, I was a perfectionist, right? And especially as a McKinsey consultant, I wanted to impress everybody. Or saying, I'm struggling with this. Now, you talk about the dialectic and there's limitations, right? So you get to choose what you want to disclose. Okay, and that's I'm not going to say that everything is worth disclosing. But in a team, as a member of the team and as a leader of the team, creating an environment where it's safe to speak up and where it's safe to say, gee, I'm super excited about this project, but there's this part, I don't know, I need help, is something that I think people have become much more accustomed to, and that from experience creates a much, much better outcome. And sometimes the enemy of being vulnerable is ourselves, because we don't want to show, certainly somebody like me didn't want to show my vulnerability. Am I answering your question? I want to make sure I do. So please double click if I didn't. Yes. Good. All right. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Layla. I'm from France. So my question is, you said purpose should be at the center of a company's strategy more than profitability. I completely agree with you. First of all, thank you so much for sharing everything you just said. It was really inspiring. For instance, Nestle, I know their CEO from France was voted out last year or something, because mainly he was too socially engaged, maybe more in CSR way. So my question is, what's your advice on how to connect purpose and diffuse a purpose sense and sustainable sense of leadership in sometimes a board that's more profitably oriented, especially in the times we're going through, which are like a crisis and so on. So if you have any advice on that, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to clarify. Purpose is the North Star, but as a leader, in my view, so there's a simple framework I use when I teach, which one of a CEO I work with is called the diamond, right? So you have purpose as the North Star, then you have strategy to make the purpose come to life and drive results. You have culture, which is the environment to unleash human magic. Then you have execution, and then in the middle you have leadership. So that's a checklist with 5 things. Now, over time as a leader, of course, you need to address all of these things. Everything needs to be in place. But for sure, it's impossible, certainly not advisable, to try to tackle each of the 5 at the same time. And a key, sometimes the CEO, the leader, is the master of the clocks. You decide when to do what. And so, faced with the situation, you get to decide, is it, what is the time? Is it the time to focus on purpose, strategy, culture, execution, or leadership? I can tell you for sure that when I joined Best Buy in 2012, if I had spoken with the employees or the investors and I said, we're going to spend, the next 12 to 24 months trying to craft our purpose and then making it come to life, I would have been laughed out of the room. And it's a bit like when Lou Gerstner became CEO of IBM in 1993. He said at the time, the last thing that IBM needs at this point is a vision. What we need is execution. And so at Best Buy, we focused first, the first 3 or 4 years, really focused on improving execution, fixing what was broken. Prices, cost, online experience, shipping speed, all of these things. We never talked about purpose. In fact, we never talked about culture. Now, I made sure that I shaped the right leadership team and that our behaviors were in line with the principles I laid out. But we did not utter the word purpose for the first 4 years. And that focus on execution allowed us to stabilize the business, rebuild credibility, rebuild foundations on which we could then build to create a better outcome and move from phase 1, which we had called Renew Blue. Blue is the color of the blue shirts at the salespeople at Best Buy, from Renew Blue to building the new blue. And so then that's when we started to work on purpose and strategy. And it's in 2018 that I told our investors in a conference, I remember this, it was in Atlanta, that I told them our purpose as a company is not to make money. And of course, I told them, as you know, we are very eager to take good care of you. And the share price had gone at the time from $11 to $75. We see it as an outcome and an imperative because we know how important you guys are because you take care of the retirement of all of America. So we're going to take good care of you. So, but it's only then, after we had demonstrated the performance, that I spoke externally about this. There's another CEO, it's a good friend I admire, and Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever. At some point, he said, it is well known for its strong focus on sustainability and so forth. He's a very inspiring leader. But at some point, he said, to be clear, I don't work for the shareholders. You know what the shareholders told him? You're right, you're gone. Right? Because he had not delivered sufficient returns. And so one of the things I had learned from that CEO that I mentioned, Jean-Marie Descarpentries, he said, in the business life, he said, Hubert, 98% of the questions that I ask as either or are better answered as and. So is it about purpose or profit? Well, it's both. Right? Or is it about revenue or cost? It's both. Is it about short-term or long-term? Both. But to this point, so purpose is not always the first place where to start, even though logically you would say that's where we should start. No, it's not always that. And between purpose, strategy, culture, execution, and leadership, you get to choose where to put your emphasis. And to finish with an example, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, most of his emphasis in his early years was around culture. He updated the purpose, but most of his focus, because he felt there had been a toxic culture at Microsoft, he needed to change that. So that's how I think about it.
Any question? The last one, yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your input. My name is Alina and I'm from Germany. You talked about the importance of empathy in leadership, which I thought was very interesting because I always thought of empathy as being something you're either born with or not. So quite a short question, what is your opinion on this? Can empathy be learned or not? Thank you.
Absolutely can be learned. There's some people, one of the beliefs I have is each of us have a unique genius, some unique talents that we have, and that it's important that we recognize, uncover, and maximize. But I believe that the leadership behaviors I've talked about, so empathy, the ability to develop these human connections, the sense of purpose, the ability to empower teams, the growth mindset, the ability to learn and be curious. I am the living proof that you can change. I remember one of my team members at Best Buy once told me, I don't believe people can change. And she was receiving feedback on the fact that she was a bit harsh with people and that she would take the oxygen out of the room. And she said, Hubert, that's who I am, that's how I lead. And I asked her, is it part of your DNA that you are behaving like an ass? I don't think so. Now, there's a question of, do people want to change? Right? And so empathy, very clearly for me, it may be easier for some of us, but empathy is something that you can acquire as a skill. My great colleague, Frances Fry, has done a lot of research on trust, how to build trust. And one of the things that research has shown is that, in our view, trust comes from three things: logic, authenticity, and empathy. Logic, if you're not logical, people are not going to trust you. Authenticity, same, and empathy. And what she says is that each of us, and you can probably think about it for yourself, as a trust anchor, so something that we more naturally gravitate towards. So for me, I know it's logic, right? That's where, if you wake me up in the middle of the night, I'm going to be logical. For others, my wife, Hortense, her anchor is empathy. She's extraordinary at this. And then we have a wobble, something that we're not as good at, and that's not our natural inclination. And you can identify for yourself which one it might be for you. But my very clear point of view is that each of us can get better at our wobble and make progress around this. So very clearly, we can all get better, and I'm the living proof of that. In fact, the last thing I would say is that my coach Marshall Goldsmith, in a book, talked about some of his clients, and he said his three best clients had been Alan Mulally, the CEO of Ford, Frances Hesselbein, who had been the president of the Girl Scouts of America. Peter Drucker said she was the best CEO in the world, and then me. And then he said, Alan and Frances, because they were always amazing, and Hubert, most improved.
Thank you, Hubert. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Romain, and thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful year and wonderful rest of your life, and keep me posted on your journey. I'll watch.
Thank you so much for your presence, I would say, and for your so strong words that will keep resonating and working within ourselves. So thank you so much, and I take the opportunity to thank you for all your support of all those initiatives pertaining to purpose and leadership within HEC, enabling us to initiate some world-class research, some also of the classes you will have the opportunity to take as electives to explore this dimension of self-knowledge, sense of purpose, ethics, and so on. So thank you so much, all of you, and thank you so much, Hubert, again. Thank you. Bye.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.